Her daughter sent a selfie while on a camping trip with the grandparents, but when her mother zoomed in on the picture, she froze and started to panic. Lydia Harron sat in her study, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the half-drawn blinds. She tried to focus on the spreadsheet open on her laptop, a critical project for a potential promotion, but her mind kept wandering. With a sigh, she rubbed her tired eyes and shifted positions in her chair for the 10th time in the past hour. "This isn't working," she muttered to herself, shoving away from the desk. The house was too quiet. Normally, her 5-year-old daughter Hazel would be bouncing around, chattering away about her day at kindergarten or demanding to be pushed on the backyard swing. But Hazel was away, camping with her grandparents, and the silence was deafening. Lydia padded down the hallway to the master bedroom and into the adjoining bathroom. She opened the cabinet above the sink, her fingers trembling slightly as they reached for the orange prescription bottle tucked behind the mouthwash. Just as her fingertips brushed against the plastic, a voice from the doorway startled her. "Lydia, don't." Nick, her husband, stood in the bathroom doorway, his expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, a habit when he was worried. "I know what you're thinking," he said softly, stepping into the small bathroom. "But you promised. 4 months clean, remember?" Lydia's hand hovered near the bottle, trembling slightly. "I can't focus, Nick. This report is due tomorrow, and I haven't written a single coherent paragraph." Her voice cracked. "Just one pill to help me concentrate." Nick gently took her hand and lowered it from the cabinet. "If you take one now, you'll take another tomorrow. Then we're back to square one, and those therapy sessions we've been going to every week will have been for nothing." Lydia's shoulders slumped as she closed the cabinet door, catching another glimpse of her tired face in the mirror. "I know you're right, I just—" She trailed off, uncertain how to explain the anxious energy coursing through her. "You're worried about Hazel," Nick said, leading her back to their bedroom and sitting beside her on the edge of the bed. "That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Lydia nodded, feeling slightly embarrassed at being so transparent. "This is the longest she's been away from us. 2 nights was already pushing it, but 3, and we've only heard from them once since they left yesterday morning." "Mom and Dad have taken her camping plenty of times before," Nick reminded her, his voice gentle but firm. "They're experienced. They've toured half the country in that camper van." "Yes, but never for 3 nights with a toddler," Lydia insisted. "And your parents aren't exactly young anymore, Nick. Hazel is 5 and full of energy. What if she wanders off while they're napping? What if we trust that my parents, who raised me and my 2 siblings without major incident, can handle one kindergartner for 3 days?" Nick interrupted with a slight smile. He massaged her tense shoulders, his strong fingers working at the knots that had formed there. "Remember why they offered to take her in the first place?" Lydia sighed. "So I could finish this project and possibly land the promotion." "Exactly. My parents adore Hazel, and they wanted to give you this time to focus. They're probably having the time of their lives showing her all the camping tricks they've picked up over the years." As Nick continued to massage her shoulders, Lydia felt some of the tension ebbing away. He was right, of course. June and Charles, Nick's parents, were experienced campers who doted on their only granddaughter. "You know," Nick said with a playful tone, leaning in closer to her ear, "if you finish your work early, we might actually get some alone time. When's the last time we had the house to ourselves for more than a few hours?" Despite her anxiety, Lydia found herself smiling. "You make a compelling argument." Lydia nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right, I'm sorry for trying to take the medication. 4 months is the longest I've gone without it, and I don't want to break that streak." She stood up, squaring her shoulders with renewed determination. The pills would stay in the cabinet where they belonged. She had promises to keep, to Nick, to her therapist, and most importantly, to herself. With Nick by her side, she walked out of the bathroom, leaving the pills behind. Back in the bedroom, Lydia's phone chimed with a notification. She hurried to the bedside table where it was charging and saw a new message from June, Nick's mother. "It's from your mum," she told Nick, eagerly opening the chat. A blurry selfie appeared on the screen, alongside a string of nonsensical letters. Lydia couldn't help but chuckle. Hazel had clearly gotten hold of June's phone. "Look at this," she said, showing Nick the phone. "Hazel's learning how to take selfies now." Nick peered over her shoulder and laughed. "Kids these days and technology. She's only 5 and already more tech-savvy than my parents." The picture was partially blurred, but Lydia could make out a campsite in the background. More importantly, Hazel's grinning face was visible, her blonde curls wild around her cherubic face. She looked happy and safe, which eased some of Lydia's anxiety. She was about to call back when another picture arrived. This one was clearer, Hazel with her tongue out in classic 5-year-old fashion. In the background, Lydia could see the camper van and June and Charles sitting around a fireplace. But there was someone else there too, a man Lydia didn't recognize. No, that wasn't quite right. There was something eerily familiar about him. Lydia frowned and zoomed in on the man's face. Her heart began to pound as recognition dawned. "Nick," she called, her voice tight. "Come look at this." Nick, who had returned to the living room couch to read the news on his tablet, called back, "What is it?" "Just come here, please." When Nick returned, Lydia thrust the phone into his hands. "Do you see what I see?" Nick squinted at the screen, pinching and zooming to get a better look at the man. "Looks like some random camper to me. Probably another family they met at the site." "No," Lydia insisted, taking the phone back and zooming in again. "Look more carefully, that's Caleb." "Caleb, your ex-husband?" Nick's tone was skeptical. "I don't think so, Lydia. Caleb was always clean-cut and his hair was darker. This guy has light brown hair." But Lydia was certain. Despite the changes in his appearance, the hair, the fuller beard, she recognized the shape of his eyes, the set of his jaw. This was definitely Caleb. She checked the calendar on her phone. "It's been 5 years," she murmured, more to herself than to Nick. 5 years since he went to prison for domestic violence and drugs. Nick's expression softened. He knew Lydia's history with Caleb, the abuse she'd suffered when she was pregnant with Hazel, the night Caleb had nearly choked her to death before the police arrived. "If that really is Caleb," Lydia continued, her voice trembling, "then he must have been released. But why didn't anyone inform me? I should have been notified." Panic rising in her chest, Lydia tried calling June, but there was no answer. She tried Charles next with the same result. "Let's go," she said to Nick, already grabbing her purse. Nick hesitated. "Lydia, are you sure?" "Let's go," she repeated, her voice rising with urgency. "If Caleb is there with Hazel, we need to get to them right now." Nick nodded, finally sensing the gravity of the situation. He rushed downstairs to start the car while Lydia grabbed a few more necessities. Before following him, however, Lydia ducked back into the bathroom. She opened the cabinet again and stared at the medication. After a minute of internal struggle, she grabbed the entire bottle and shoved it into her purse. "Lydia!" "Let's go," Nick called from downstairs. She hurried downstairs to the driveway where Nick was waiting in the car, engine running. As she slid into the passenger seat, she felt the weight of the pill bottle in her purse like a guilty secret. "Trinity Pines is about an hour away," Nick said as they pulled out of the driveway. "Try calling your in-laws again while I drive." Lydia nodded, clutching her phone tightly. She was trying not to imagine the worst, but if Caleb was really at the campsite with her daughter, nothing good could come of it. Trinity Pines Campground was nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, a peaceful, rustic retreat surrounded by towering pines and meandering hiking trails. Lydia and Nick had visited the area many times with Hazel, and June and Charles had mentioned they would spend 2 nights there, before moving to another park for their 3rd night. "I still don't understand how Caleb could be there," Nick said as they sped down the highway. "Do my parents know him? Have they ever met him?" Lydia asked. Nick shook his head, keeping his eyes on the road. "I don't think so. They're away in their camper so often they're not really up to date with what's happening around town." "Maybe it's just someone who looks like him," Lydia suggested, trying to calm herself. But deep down she knew better. That was Caleb in the photo. As they continued driving in anxious silence, Lydia's thoughts drifted back to the night Caleb was arrested. She had been 8 months pregnant, her belly enormous and tender. The memory of his hands around her throat, squeezing as his face contorted with rage, was something she'd tried for years to forget. If the neighbors hadn't called the police... "Look," Nick said suddenly, pulling Lydia from her dark memories. "Police cars." "Oh, God," she whispered, clutching the dashboard as Nick accelerated even more, his knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. They parked hastily and rushed toward the cluster of police officers and rangers gathered near the center of the campground. The campground parking area now buzzing with activity. Another police car had joined the others, and Lydia could see uniformed officers talking to various campers. Her eyes frantically scanned the area for June and Charles's camper van. It wasn't hard to spot June and Charles. They were seated at a picnic table, speaking to a detective who was taking notes. Charles had an ice pack pressed against his temple, and June looked pale and shaken. "There," Nick pointed to the familiar blue and white vehicle parked near a cluster of pine trees. "And there's my dad." As they approached, Lydia overheard Charles describing what had happened. "He introduced himself as Collins," Charles was saying, his voice trembling slightly. "Seemed like a decent fellow. Very kind to us and especially to Hazel. Last night we even had a barbecue together." "He came with a woman named Maya," June added. "His sister, I think. Elegant woman, but friendly too. They were both so good with children. Since yesterday they've been keeping Hazel company, playing with her, drawing and coloring." "During the BBQ last night," Charles continued, "he told Hazel all sorts of children's stories, and he was a great cook, made the meat so tender that Hazel, who usually isn't fond of meat, finished her entire dinner. We thought they were good people." The detective nodded, still taking notes. "And what happened this morning?" Charles lowered the ice pack, revealing a nasty bruise. "After breakfast, they said they were leaving soon. Hazel was upset and asked to play with them one more time. They promised not to go far. Said they were just going to pick leaves and flowers like they had yesterday." June took over, her voice quavering. "I was cleaning inside the camper, arranging Hazel's things. Charles was outside reading." Charles continued. "Yeah, I was reading outside. I didn't realize. I was so engrossed in my book I didn't see them getting her into their vehicle. By the time I heard the engine start and looked up, they were already pulling away." "I ran after them," he said, touching his bruised face gingerly. "Got to the driver's side before they could leave the campground. Collins, if that's even his real name, got out and hit me. Multiple times. I couldn't stop him." June reached over to take her husband's hand. "I called the police immediately, but they've been gone for more than an hour now." Detective Rawlins spoke up. "Child abductors typically try to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the abduction site. We've put out an alert for the camper van, but without a license plate number, it's challenging." "Do you have any photos of this Collins person?" Nick asked. June shook her head sadly. "We don't really take many pictures when we're camping. It's not our habit." Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. "The selfie," she gasped. "Hazel sent us a selfie from your phone, June. The man was in the background." She fumbled with her phone, pulling up the clearer of the 2 photos Hazel had sent, and handed it to Detective Rawlins. I think it might be my ex-husband, Caleb Winters." The detective studied the photo carefully. "Why would you think your ex-husband would take your daughter?" Lydia took a deep breath, aware of all eyes on her. "Caleb went to prison 5 years ago for domestic violence and drug possession. I was 35 weeks pregnant with Hazel when he..." She swallowed hard. "When he assaulted me, I nearly died. If the police hadn't arrived when they did..." She pulled up an old photo of Caleb from social media and showed it to the detective. "The man in Hazel's selfie looks different. He has hair now and he's heavier, but I'm almost certain it's him." Detective Rawlins compared the 2 photos thoughtfully. "There are similarities, though it's hard to be 100% certain with the quality of the image and the changes you mentioned. If this is indeed your ex-husband, Mrs. Harron, it would make sense that he's targeting his biological child." Another officer approached their group, speaking quietly to Detective Rawlins before addressing them all. "We've spoken with other campers and the campground manager. Several people reported seeing a camper van matching the description heading toward town, not up the mountain as we initially thought." Lydia's phone suddenly vibrated. displaying an unknown number. She dismissed it, assuming it was a marketing call from a bank or insurance company. But when it immediately rang again, she reconsidered. "Excuse me," she said to the detective. "I need to take this call." Lydia stepped away from the group, finding a quiet corner near a cluster of pine trees. Her hand trembled as she answered the call. "Hello?" "Keep your voice down and listen carefully," the voice on the other end said, sending a chill down Lydia's spine. It was unmistakably Caleb. In the background, she could hear Hazel chattering excitedly about something. "Caleb," she whispered, her free hand curling into a fist. "What have you done? Where's Hazel?" "She's fine," he replied, his tone eerily calm. "She's having the time of her life, actually. Aren't you, sweetheart?" His voice became slightly distant as he presumably turned to speak to Hazel. Lydia heard her daughter's cheerful reply, the innocent sound nearly breaking her. "Caleb, please," she pleaded quietly. "Don't do this. She doesn't even know you." "That's exactly the problem, isn't it?" His voice hardened. "My own daughter doesn't know me. 5 years of her life gone, time I'll never get back." "You have no right—" "I have every right. I'm her biological father," he snapped, cutting her off. "Now listen closely. I don't want to hurt Hazel. I didn't take her to harm her. I just want to talk. You and me, we have unfinished business." Lydia glanced back at the group huddled around Detective Rawlins. Nick was watching her, concern etched across his face. "Why should I believe you?" she snapped. "You took my daughter. You knew she'd be here with my in-laws. You planned this, didn't you?" "Because if you don't come alone, if you tell the police or that husband of yours about this call, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you really are." His voice lowered dangerously. "I'll tell them everything, Lydia, every dirty little secret." Her blood ran cold. "What are you talking about? You can't threaten me. The police won't believe anything you say." Caleb let out a humorless laugh. "Won't they? Have you forgotten what you did? Cheating on me with Nick while you were pregnant. The amount of alcohol and drugs you consumed even though you knew you were carrying our child. Or how about the money you stole from your company to feed your addiction?" Lydia's legs nearly gave out. She leaned against a nearby tree for support, making sure she was still out of earshot from the others. "That's all in the past," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Nick and I got help. We've been clean for 4 months and—" "For 4 whole months," Caleb mocked. "Congratulations. But those company funds you embezzled, that little accounting trick that got 3 innocent employees fired, that doesn't just go away, Lydia." She closed her eyes, shame and fear battling within her. "What do you want, Caleb?" "I told you I want to talk. Meet me at the Sunshine Cafe in Oak Ridge. You know it. My sister owns it. Come alone. Bring Hazel's documents, birth certificate, medical records, everything." "Why would I bring her documents?" Lydia asked, suspicion rising. "You'll understand when you get here. And Lydia, don't make me wait. Don't call this number back and don't try anything clever. Remember what's at stake." The line went dead. Lydia tried immediately to call back, but as Caleb had warned, the number was already disconnected. She stared at her phone, mind racing through impossible options. If she told the police about the call, Caleb might follow through on his threat. The embezzlement had happened over 5 years ago, but the statute of limitations hadn't expired. She could face criminal charges, lose her job, lose custody of Hazel, everything she'd worked so hard to build. But if she went alone, was she walking into a trap? What did Caleb really want after all this time? Taking a deep breath to compose herself, Lydia returned to the group. Nick immediately moved to her side. "Who was that?" he asked. "You were on the phone for a while." Lydia's mind raced for a plausible lie. "It was from the office," she said, avoiding his gaze. "They're demanding that report. I was supposed to email them. They're not happy with the delay." Nick looked skeptical but didn't press the issue. Around them, the police had cordoned off an area with yellow tape, and more officers had arrived. The detective approached them with a serious expression. "We've set up roadblocks and issued an AMBER alert for Hazel. It would be best for all of you to go home and rest. We'll update you as soon as we have any information." Lydia nodded absently, her mind already formulating a plan to get away and meet Caleb. "I'm going to take my parents to the hospital," Nick said, putting his arm around Lydia's shoulders. "Charles needs to get that head wound properly examined, and they're both pretty shaken up." Charles and June were already being led to an ambulance, the older man still clutching the ice pack to his head. "I need to take their camper back," Nick continued. "What about you?" Lydia saw her opportunity. "I think I'll go home," she said. "I need to finish that work project." Nick looked at her incredulously. "Now, in the middle of all this, did you tell your office what happened?" "It's just a small business thing I need to deal with," Lydia insisted. "I'll catch up with you at the hospital in a few hours. That promotion is still important, Nick." Nick frowned but eventually nodded. "All right, if that's what you need to do." They said their goodbyes to the police, with promises to stay in touch if there were any developments. Lydia watched as the ambulance departed with June and Charles, Nick following behind in their camper van. Once alone in her car, the facade Lydia had been maintaining crumbled. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, her body trembling as panic and anxiety overtook her. Tears streamed down her face as she pounded the steering wheel in frustration. "Why is this happening?" she sobbed to the empty car. "Why now?" Her gaze fell on her purse sitting on the passenger seat. The bottle of pills she'd taken from home seemed to call to her, promising instant relief from the overwhelming stress. With shaking hands, Lydia reached for the purse and withdrew the bottle. She twisted off the cap and shook a tablet into her palm, staring at it with a mixture of longing and self-loathing. She remembered her promise to Nick, the 4 months of sobriety they'd fought so hard to maintain. But this was different, wasn't it? This was an emergency. She needed to be clear-headed to save Hazel, and her anxiety was making that impossible. Rationalizing her decision, Lydia broke the tablet in half. A smaller dose wouldn't be as dangerous, she told herself. It would just take the edge off, help her focus without compromising her driving ability. She swallowed the half-pill dry, waiting for the familiar calming effect to wash over her. After a few minutes, she felt her racing heart slow and her mind clear. The panic receded, replaced by a determined focus. With steady hands now, Lydia started the car and pulled out of the campground parking lot, heading for home. The drive from Trinity Pines back to their home would have normally taken just under an hour, but Lydia made it in 40 minutes, her mind too preoccupied to notice her speedometer creeping well above the limit on the winding mountain roads. The house felt unnervingly quiet as she entered. Lydia went straight to the master bedroom, where a small fireproof lockbox held all their important documents. Her fingers fumbled with the combination lock, requiring 3 attempts before it finally opened. Inside were their passports, social security cards, insurance policies, and Hazel's documents: birth certificate, social security card, immunization records, and medical history. She rifled through the papers, organizing Hazel's documents into a manila folder. As she worked, questions tumbled through her mind. Why did Caleb want these papers? Was he planning to take Hazel away permanently, out of state or even out of the country? "I won't let that happen," she whispered fiercely to the empty room. Lydia glanced at the clock. She needed to get moving. Oak Ridge was about 30 minutes away in the opposite direction from her home. She gathered Hazel's documents, took a deep breath, and headed back to her car. The Sunshine Cafe was situated in the heart of Oak Ridge, its cheerful yellow awning visible from a block away. Adjacent to the cafe was a colorful playground designed to keep children entertained while parents enjoyed their coffee and pastries. Lydia parked across the street, scanning for the familiar camper van that belonged to Caleb and Maya, but it wasn't there. Only a sleek black luxury car sat by the curb. Then she spotted Hazel in the sandbox, her heart leaping at the sight of her daughter, safe, smiling, carefree. But the relief shattered just as quickly. A woman, presumably Maya, had seen her. Without hesitation, she ushered Hazel toward the indoor playground, her movements swift, purposeful, like she'd been waiting for Lydia to arrive. "At least she's okay," Lydia murmured to herself, deciding to leave Hazel's documents in the car for now. She wouldn't hand them over until she absolutely had to. As Lydia crossed the street, a woman with sleek dark hair and designer sunglasses approached her. She had Caleb's same jawline and carried herself with the confident air of someone accustomed to luxury. "Maya," Lydia acknowledged coldly. "He's waiting inside," Maya replied, gesturing toward a private room often used for children's birthday parties. "This way." The cafe wasn't crowded today, with only a few patrons scattered at the outdoor tables. Inside the private room, Caleb sat at a table, looking more polished than the man Lydia remembered. Prison had changed him physically. He was leaner, his once bald head now covered with light brown hair, his formerly clean-shaven face sporting a well-groomed beard. "Lydia," he greeted her, his voice carrying the same smooth charm that had once captivated her. "It's been a long time." Lydia felt the effects of the medication wearing off, anxiety creeping back as she faced her ex-husband. "Hazel," she demanded, forgoing pleasantries. "She'll start looking for me soon." "She's perfectly fine, as you saw for yourself," Caleb assured her. "Maya will keep her entertained while we talk." "What do you want, Caleb?" Lydia asked, taking a seat across from him but keeping her distance. Caleb leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I want to discuss an arrangement with you. It's quite simple, really. I want you to tell Hazel the truth, that I'm her father. I want her to live with me." "That's absurd," Lydia exclaimed. "You can't just show up after 5 years and expect—" "You would still get to see her," Caleb interrupted smoothly. "Once a week, supervised visits. You get to continue your life with Nick, the man you cheated with while you were still with me, and I get to raise my daughter. It's fair, considering the circumstances." "And if I refuse?" Lydia challenged, though she already knew the answer. "Then I report everything you did to the police," Caleb said simply. "The drug use during pregnancy, the embezzlement from your company. You'd lose Hazel anyway, but you'd also end up in jail." Lydia's rage bubbled to the surface. "You did all those things too, Caleb. You took drugs and drank alcohol alongside me. You never tried to stop me even though you knew I was pregnant. We were both terrible, both not ready for a baby." "The difference," Caleb replied calmly, "is that I didn't steal thousands from my company and I didn't cheat on you." "Please," Lydia begged, her anger giving way to desperation. "I don't take illegal drugs anymore. I've been through therapy. I have prescribed medication now, and I haven't even taken that for 4 months. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Just 4 months? After 5 years? So you were still taking drugs while caring for our baby?" "The medication was prescribed," Lydia insisted. "My therapist said it was safe. I only took it after Hazel was asleep, and I always dumped my milk afterward when I was breastfeeding." "In prison I got therapy too," Caleb said, a hint of pride in his voice. "I've been completely clean for over 3 years now. If anyone deserved her, it's me." He leaned back in his chair, considering her. "But that's beside the point. Here's what's going to happen. Tonight Hazel stays with me. You tell her I'm her father, her real father. Tomorrow you don't come to pick her up. You can visit her on Saturday." "And if I don't agree?" Lydia asked, though she already knew she had no real choice. "Then I call the police and tell them everything about your past," Caleb said simply. "Your choice, Lydia." Feeling cornered, Lydia reluctantly nodded. "Fine, I'll tell her." They walked together to the playground where Hazel was building a sandcastle with Maya. When the little girl spotted Lydia, her face lit up. "Mommy!" she squealed, running to Lydia and throwing her arms around her legs. Lydia knelt down, hugging her daughter tightly, savoring the feel of her small, warm body. "Hi, sweetie. Are you having fun?" Hazel nodded enthusiastically. "Mr. Collins and Ms. Maya took me camping. We saw deer and picked flowers and had marshmallows." The innocence in her daughter's voice made what Lydia had to do next even more painful. She took a deep breath and said, "Hazel, sweetie, I need to tell you something important. This man isn't really Mr. Collins. His name is Caleb, and he's your father." Hazel's brow furrowed in confusion. "But Daddy Nick is my daddy." "Yes, Nick is your daddy too," Lydia explained, struggling to find the right words. "But Caleb is your real daddy, from when you were a tiny baby in my tummy." Hazel processed this information with the simple logic of a 5-year-old. So I have 2 daddies? Yes, Lydia confirmed, relief washing over her that Hazel wasn't upset. The little girl seemed to accept this new reality with remarkable ease. She looked up at Caleb with curious eyes. Can I go to your house? Do you have toys? Caleb smiled, kneeling down to Hazel's level. I do have toys and a swimming pool. Would you like to see it? Hazel's eyes widened with excitement, but then her expression changed. But I want Mommy to come too. I miss Mommy. Lydia's heart broke at her daughter's words. I can't come tonight, sweetie. I have work to do, but you're going to stay at Daddy Caleb's house tonight, and I'll come get you tomorrow. Hazel's face fell and she began to protest. No, I want you to come with me. Seeing her daughter's distress, Lydia quickly amended her plan. Okay, how about this? I'll go with you to Caleb's house and then I'll leave. Would that be okay? Hazel considered this compromise, then nodded reluctantly. Okay. Wonderful, Caleb said, standing up. He turned to Lydia, his voice low enough that Hazel couldn't hear. Don't forget her documents. You better cooperate or I will involve my lawyer. Lydia nodded mutely, her heart heavy as she watched Hazel take Caleb's hand willingly. She had just agreed to hand her daughter over to her abuser, and there seemed to be nothing she could do about it. Hazel clambered into Caleb's car with Maya, chattering excitedly about the swimming pool and what toys might be at the house. Lydia returned to her own vehicle, her movements mechanical, her mind numb with the weight of what was happening. Once inside her car, with the door shut against the world, Lydia finally allowed herself to feel the full force of her despair. Tears flowed freely as she pounded the steering wheel again, this time in anger rather than panic. How could I let this happen? She whispered to the empty car. How could I agree to give her up? The crushing sense of helplessness threatened to overwhelm her. She had 2 impossible choices: surrender Hazel to Caleb and lose her daughter, or confess her past crimes and lose her daughter while also going to jail. Either way, Hazel would grow up without her mother. Lydia tried to think through her options rationally. If she gave Caleb the documents, he could potentially testify in court that she had willingly surrendered Hazel to him. With a good lawyer, he might be able to secure full custody. And then what? Would he allow her to see Hazel at all? Or would he take the child and disappear, ensuring Lydia never saw her daughter again? On the other hand, if she went to the police and Nick confessed everything, Caleb would be arrested for kidnapping since he had no legal custody rights. But then she'd face prosecution for her past crimes. Would she go to jail? For how long? And what would happen to Hazel in the meantime? The stress and anxiety built within her until Lydia found herself reaching for her purse again, seeking the false comfort of the pills. She opened the bottle and stared at the remaining half-tablet from earlier, then shook out a whole pill to join it. 1.5 doses would help numb the pain, she told herself, help her think more clearly. She placed the pills on her tongue and swallowed, but then, after a moment when she began to feel the effect, a wave of self-disgust crashed over her. Was this really who she wanted to be? A woman who turned to drugs at the first sign of trouble. A mother who wasn't strong enough to fight for her child without chemical assistance. No, she said aloud, spitting the pills into her hand. I will not do this. I am better than this. With sudden determination, Lydia threw open her car door and hurried to the nearest trash bin. She gagged herself with her fingers, forcing herself to vomit up any remnants of the earlier half-pill still in her system. I have to deserve my daughter, she told herself between heaves. I can't fall off the wagon. I have to keep it together. Once she had purged as much as possible, Lydia returned to her car, gulping water from a bottle in the cup holder to rinse the acrid taste from her mouth. Her head was clearer now, her resolve stronger. She would go to Caleb's house, the place she once called home during their marriage, but she wouldn't be giving up. Not on herself, and certainly not on Hazel. Starting the engine, Lydia pulled away from the curb, following Caleb's car toward the confrontation that awaited her. Caleb's house stood on a quiet street, lined with manicured lawns and tasteful landscaping. It was larger than the home Lydia shared with Nick, with a sprawling backyard featuring an in-ground pool, a luxury that would certainly appeal to a 5-year-old. As Lydia pulled into the driveway, she could hear Hazel's laughter drifting through an open window. Caleb's car was already parked in the garage, its door still open from their recent arrival. Lydia sat in her car for a moment, gathering her courage. The envelope containing Hazel's documents lay on the passenger seat. She picked it up, then decided to leave it in the car for now. She wouldn't surrender those papers until she absolutely had to. The house was exactly as she remembered it, though the decor had been updated. As she stepped through the front door, memories washed over her, some good, many bad. This was where she had lived during her darkest days, where her addiction had nearly destroyed her. She followed the sound of Hazel's voice to what had once been designated as a nursery, though Hazel had never actually lived here. Caleb had converted it into a playroom filled with toys and books that would delight any child. Maya was nowhere to be seen. "Mommy!" Hazel exclaimed when she spotted Lydia, running to hug her. "Look at all the toys!" Caleb looked up from where he was setting up a dollhouse. "Maya went to buy some supplies for Hazel," he explained. Lydia nodded, taking in the newly decorated room. It was perfect for a toddler girl, with pastel colors and whimsical artwork on the walls. Her eyes drifted to a familiar cabinet in the corner, and suddenly she was transported back 5 years. That cabinet top was where she and Nick... Shame and regret flooded through her. She had been so lost then, so confused and afraid of the impending responsibility of motherhood. Drunk and high, she had made the worst mistake of her life on that very cabinet. As if reading her thoughts, Caleb smiled smugly. "So you remember?" Lydia ignored him, moving toward the cabinet as if drawn by an invisible force. She placed the envelope of documents on top of it, her attention caught by a framed photograph sitting there. It was a picture of Caleb and Maya when they were younger, their arms around each other. Hanging from the frame was a heart-shaped bracelet that stirred something in Lydia's memory. She picked up the bracelet, examining it more closely. On impulse, she opened the heart locket, finding inside a photograph of Caleb and Maya embracing in a way that no brother and sister should. The sight triggered a flood of buried memories. She hadn't cheated on Caleb on a random impulse. She had found this same bracelet in Maya's room one day, opened it, and seen the truth of Caleb's incestuous relationship with his sister. Heartbroken and disgusted, she had turned to Nick for comfort, which eventually led to their affair. Her memory of that time was foggy, clouded by drugs and alcohol and the trauma that followed, but now it all came rushing back with crystal clarity. With renewed determination, Lydia snatched up the documents and the bracelet, turning to leave the room. "What are you doing?" Caleb demanded, rising to his feet. "Where are you going with those papers?" Lydia ignored him, striding purposefully toward the front door. Caleb abandoned the dollhouse and rushed after her, leaving Hazel alone with her new toys. As Lydia reached her car, she pulled out her phone and dialed Nick's number. It went to voicemail, but she left an urgent message. "Nick, it's me. I'm at Caleb's house with Hazel. There's something I need to tell you, but..." She turned over her shoulder. "Nick, we need help. Please bring the police." Before she could say more, Caleb caught up to her, snatching the phone from her hand, and switched off the call and threw it away. "What do you think you're doing?" he growled, his charming facade crumbling to reveal the violence beneath. Lydia tried to wrestle free, clutching the bracelet and documents tightly. "Let go of me, Caleb." His response was a backhanded slap so powerful, it split her lip and sent her sprawling onto the driveway. "Mommy!" Hazel screamed from the doorway, having followed them outside. "Hazel, go back inside," Lydia cried, blood trickling from her lip. "Go to your room, it's not safe." But Hazel stood frozen, her eyes wide with terror at the scene unfolding before her. Caleb loomed over Lydia, noticing the bracelet in her grip. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. "You cheated on me first," Lydia spat, holding up the locket. "With your own sister, and now you two are planning to take my daughter. Never." Caleb's face twisted with rage. He grabbed the bracelet, yanking it from her grasp with such force that the chain snapped. Lydia used the thick envelope of documents to hit Caleb's face, but it was an ineffective weapon. With a snarl, Caleb grabbed her by the throat, his fingers digging into the same flesh he had nearly crushed 5 years earlier. "You know nothing," he hissed as he dragged her to her feet and into the house, leaving Hazel crying on the front step. He pulled Lydia to the bedroom, throwing her onto the bed and locking the door behind them. As she gasped for breath, he loomed over her, his eyes wild with fury. "You think you can threaten me?" he growled, climbing on top of her as she struggled beneath him. "You think you can take my daughter away from me again?" They fought, crashing into the edge of the bed in a blur of tangled limbs and raw panic. Lydia clawed at his arm, trying to twist free as Caleb forced her backward, his grip like iron. She managed to wrench one arm loose and aimed a wild kick at his shin, connecting hard. He grunted in pain, momentarily stumbling, and she tried to scramble away, toward the door, toward anything that looked like escape. But he caught her ankle and yanked, sending her sprawling onto the carpet. Lydia's elbow slammed into the floor, pain shooting up her arm. She cried out, flipping onto her back just in time to see him looming over her, his face flushed, breathing heavy. Then in the distance a siren wailed, growing steadily louder. Caleb froze, then cursed. "You called the police," he accused, his grip tightening around her throat. Lydia clawed at his hands, fighting for air. "No," she managed to choke out. "Nick must have gotten my message." With a furious roar, Caleb snatched the old baseball bat leaning against the bedside table, a leftover from his college years. He raised it above his head, eyes blazing. "I hope you never get to watch Hazel grow up," he snarled. The last thing Lydia saw before everything went black was the bat swinging toward her skull and the hatred burning in Caleb's eyes. The steady beep of a heart monitor pulled Lydia from the darkness. She blinked against the harsh fluorescent lights, gradually becoming aware of the sterile hospital room surrounding her. Pain throbbed at the back of her head, intense despite whatever medication they had her on. As consciousness fully returned, so did the memory of what had happened at Caleb's house. Fear lanced through her. Where was Hazel? Was she safe? A nurse entered the room, noticing Lydia's open eyes. "You're awake," she said with a professional smile. "How are you feeling?" "My head," Lydia murmured, her voice raspy. "It hurts." "That's to be expected," the nurse replied, checking the monitors. "You sustained a serious concussion, but you're going to be okay." She made some notes on her clipboard. "Your husband and daughter have been waiting to see you, and there are some police officers who'd like to speak with you when you're ready." Relief flooded through Lydia at the mention of Hazel. "My daughter, she's okay?" "She's fine," the nurse assured her. "A brave little girl, from what I hear. Shall I send them in?" Lydia nodded, wincing at the pain the movement caused. A few minutes later, Nick entered the room, holding Hazel's hand. The little girl broke free and rushed to the bed, careful not to jostle it as Nick had clearly instructed her. "Mommy, you're awake!" she exclaimed, her small face lighting up. "I was scared when you were sleeping for so long." "How long was I unconscious?" Lydia asked Nick, reaching out to stroke Hazel's hair. "About 3 hours," Nick replied, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit with a baseball bat." Lydia attempted a weak joke, then turned serious. "What happened after I blacked out? How did you find us?" Nick pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, lifting Hazel onto his lap. "I never made it to the hospital with my parents. I kept thinking about that phone call you got at the campground, how strange you were acting afterward. When I tried calling you and couldn't reach you, I got worried." He reached out and took her hand. "But it was Hazel who saved you. After Caleb attacked you, she called 911, told them her mommy needed help." Lydia turned to Hazel in amazement. "You called 911, sweetheart?" Hazel nodded proudly. "Like you taught me. I used the phone in the kitchen when the scary man hurt you. I don't want him to be my daddy. I love Nick." Tears welled in Lydia's eyes as the weight of it all hit her, how close she'd come to losing everything, and how her daughter's quick thinking had saved her. She pulled Hazel close, voice trembling. "You're such a smart, brave girl," she whispered. "And yes, sweetheart, one daddy, Nick, is more than enough for us." "The police arrived just as Caleb and Maya were trying to flee with Hazel," Nick continued, They're both in custody now. A knock at the door interrupted them. 2 police officers entered, nodding politely to the family. "Mrs. Harron," one of them began, "we're glad to see you awake. I'm Detective Wilson, and this is Officer Garcia. We'd like to ask you some questions about what happened today, if you're feeling up to it." Lydia nodded cautiously, mindful of her throbbing head. "Of course." "We were able to apprehend Caleb Miller and Maya Miller as they were attempting to leave the house with your daughter," Detective Wilson explained. "They're both in custody now, facing multiple charges, including kidnapping, assault, and false imprisonment." "We also located the camper van they used at the campsite," Officer Garcia added. "It was abandoned in an empty warehouse about 10 miles from the Oak Ridge town center. Based on the tire tracks and timeline, they arrived there approximately 30 minutes after leaving the campground with your daughter." "That must be where they switched to their family car," Lydia said, pieces falling into place. "Caleb always kept an Audi sedan in the garage. They probably left the camper to avoid detection since you would have been looking for it." Detective Wilson nodded. "That matches our theory. We found some of Hazel's belongings in the camper, a stuffed rabbit and some drawings she did at the campsite." "Mr. Bunny," Hazel exclaimed, "I thought I lost him." "We'll make sure you get him back, sweetheart," Officer Garcia assured her with a smile. The detective turned back to Lydia. "Now, Mrs. Harron, your husband mentioned that Mr. Miller contacted you at the campsite. Can you tell us about that conversation?" Lydia took a deep breath, knowing what she had to do. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you first." She glanced at Nick apologetically. "Something I should have told everyone a long time ago." Nick frowned, confused. "Lydia, what are you talking about?" "The reason I didn't report Caleb immediately when I saw him in that photo," Lydia began, her voice trembling, "is because he blackmailed and threatened me. He said if I went to the police, he would tell them about my past." She turned to the officers. 5 years ago, before I was married to Nick, I stole money from the company I worked for, about $15,000. I used it to feed my drug addiction and pay off debts. I manipulated the company's books, and innocent employees were fired based on suspicion. The officers exchanged glances, Detective Wilson beginning to take notes. "When Caleb went to prison for attacking me, he didn't tell the police about what I'd done. He said it was for Hazel's sake, so she wouldn't be born with her mother in jail. But now he's using it against me to try to take her away." Nick's face had gone pale. "Lydia, why didn't you tell me?" "I was ashamed," she admitted, tears streaming down her face, "and afraid I'd lose you and Hazel if you knew the truth." She turned back to the officers. "I understand I'll be prosecuted for what I did. I'm prepared to face the consequences. I just need to know that my daughter will be safe while I'm gone." The officers questioned her more deeply about the embezzlement, dates, amounts, methods, taking detailed notes for their report. "You will face charges for these crimes," Detective Wilson confirmed. "We'll need to coordinate with the Financial Crimes Division. As for your daughter, that will be up to the family court to decide." "If there's any statement from my therapist about my recovery," Lydia asked hesitantly, "will the court consider that when determining custody?" "It will certainly be taken into account," the detective assured her. "If you've maintained sobriety and shown genuine rehabilitation, that will work in your favor." Lydia nodded, relief mingling with her anxiety. At least there was hope. After the police left, promising to return the next day for a formal statement, Lydia turned to Nick, expecting anger or disappointment. Instead, he was looking at her with a complex mixture of emotions. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked again, his voice soft. "I was so afraid of losing you both," Lydia admitted. "I thought if you knew everything I'd done, you wouldn't want me anymore." Nick shook his head. "We've been through so much together, Lydia. We've fought our demons side by side. Did you really think I'd abandon you over something that happened before we were married?" "I don't know," Lydia whispered. "I just couldn't bear the thought of losing you or Hazel." "Mommy," Hazel spoke up, her small face serious. "Are you going away?" Lydia swallowed hard, looking into her daughter's innocent eyes. "For a little while, sweetie. I did something wrong a long time ago, and now I need to make it right." "Will you come back?" Hazel's voice quavered. Of course I will, Lydia promised, squeezing her daughter's hand. And while I'm gone, you'll stay with Daddy Nick and Grandma and Grandpa. They'll take good care of you. Hazel considered this, then asked, What about the other man? Is he still my dad too? Lydia exchanged a glance with Nick before answering carefully. Caleb is your biological father, yes, but Nick is your dad in all the ways that really matter. He loves you and takes care of you every day. Hazel nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. As Lydia watched her daughter snuggle against Nick's chest, a strange sense of peace settled over her despite the uncertainty of her future. She had finally faced her past and told the truth. Whatever consequences came, she would face them with the knowledge that she was finally doing the right thing. Sometimes love meant making difficult choices. Sometimes it meant sacrificing your own freedom to ensure your child's safety and well-being. And sometimes it meant finding the courage to be honest, no matter how painful the truth might be. For the first time in years, Lydia felt worthy of her daughter's love. Not because she was perfect, far from it, but because she had finally found the strength to be honest, to take responsibility, and to put Hazel's needs above her own fears. That, she realized, was what being a mother truly meant.